I know it feels a little odd without any music, guys, but
Seriously.
Lauren's not here this week. Isn't that weird, Tomer? Do you want to sing for us?
Oh, that's the last thing you want if it's not musical at all. So
Bitcoin today, not Bitcoin yesterday. Bitcoin today.
You'll be proud
Does
of
that
me,
help?
Cosmo. I don't know if you went to the original Bitcoin Today link, but I deleted it immediately because I realized I had forgotten again to click the record button. So fortunately, I was fast
Oh,
enough.
praise the heavens. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Muchly appreciated.
Terrence, do you mind making me a co-host today as well? We're going to have Tim, who's going to talk about his Bitcoin and psychedelics thing, and so I thought maybe I could invite him up and be
That
co-host.
that invitation is in your mailbox. I guess you never opened it.
An invitation to co-host.
Yeah, it's. Did you just click the button on your phone right now?
It doesn't show.
Oh, weird. Let me try it again.
Sometimes, yeah, I was gonna say sometimes you have to remove and then re-add.
Okay, hang on a sec.
Oh, you've already got two co-hosts. That's your problem.
Oh,
There you
hang
go.
on, Dark. I'm going to put you. Tomer's got a special guest, so I'm going to put you for a speaker for now, if you're okay with that. There he is.
We didn't even ask him, eh? If you're okay with that, I've
I
got it.
went into his mailbox and I pulled the invite out. All right, but until we have your special guest, Tomer, let's catch up on the news today. I saw you were in an earlier space. I didn't get to jump in there because you get into some of these early ones. Let's see. All right, I don't see any more. I don't see any more invites.
Yeah, I do miss the music. Do 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 do.
Yeah, I'm not much of a singer. I'm not gonna. We could get clips of here. Let's get some fun clips, huh? Maybe we can.
I'm
I'll
surprised you
make some
don't have
noises.
like some AI tool, Cosmo, where you can just do a song for us in the style of Creed and just have that play in the background. You're normally all ready with your widgets, you know.
Is this interesting? Is this as fun as the intro
Now
music?
it just sounds like you're in a can now.
How about now?
That's a little better. Now it sounds like you sucked down some helium.
There we go. Welcome to Bitcoin Today.
Is that from your space helmet?
Yes, it is. Oh, now I can't fix it. Ah,
You're stuck
this
on
is gonna be a
it.
problem.
just stuck
Terrence and
sucking down
Cosmo,
helium all
Tim
day.
should have his hand up now, even though you haven't been able to make me a co-host or haven't tried
What?
inviting
No, let me do it again.
him.
Invite to co-host. Yeah, it says send co-host
Oh, I
to
got it. I got it.
to Tom Strobe Light.
I got
Yeah.
it. I got it this time.
Okay. Yeah, and Tim is up here. Um, let's first go around and see how everyone else is doing. Fred, what is on your mind? How are you doing this morning? I wasn't sure if we were going to wake
Good.
up.
Yeah, I'm just sort of catching up to the news here, guy. I don't have too much right now, other than I'm poor. Thank you.
You seemed distressed yesterday that nuclear war was coming, Fred, and I don't mean to
Well,
put your mind at ease, but
I don't know if it's coming, but I do feel like shit's happening, man. That's kind of my view. This nuclear, this facility thing, Trump kind of leaving the G7. I feel like it's pretty serious. That's all I will say. And also, it feels like we didn't. We're finding out stuff that we didn't know even a month ago about Iran's nuclear capabilities.
Don't we just go under our desk, in school to avoid the nuclear war, Fred?
It's called
No.
buying Bitcoin now.
Oh, right. That sounds better. How about you, Kelly? How's it going? What's on your mind?
I feel good. The news cycle feels tenuous and feels like it's overwhelmingly just trying everything possible to just push not just this whole FUD narrative, but to really, I don't know, it feels coordinated at a very high level. I don't want to say I don't believe it, but to some of Fred's posts yesterday, I agree. There's concerns, just like if you're navigating markets. Because you post a concern doesn't mean you 100% believe it's going to happen, but you have to acknowledge that there is risk there. And what does that mean? What are your steps in such case that something happens? I think hit the nail on the head. Buy Bitcoin. That's the escape hatch. Does that mean there's not going to be volatility? Hell no. There's going to be volatility, and that's one of the reasons why we appreciate this asset. I think I think this. Let me actually rephrase. I hope that this all sort of cools off into the coming 1 to 3 weeks, and the market can just resume upward. It's just bizarre. I did a post yesterday that look back about 2 months, 3 months. It's not just what we're seeing right now with Israel and Iran. It feels like anytime the market has potential legs, something flip flops. And it's not just like, oh, I feel victimized because the market's not running. It's bizarre because it's like tariffs on, tariffs off. Okay, this happened. Okay, now we flip back over to this. It feels like, maybe it's actually an overwhelmingly sort of hidden bullish signal. Could it be something as simple as the U.S. and maybe some other nations, but the U.S. primarily is like, okay, we really want to get all this legislation and stuff done, and our plan in order to start stacking. So let's not let the bulls run too far. I don't know. Maybe that's just my own sort of prophecy in my mind, because that would be incredible. But at the end of the day, this goes back to the narrative everybody was talking about in 2017 versus now. Why do we care? Or why are we so focused on what BlackRock is doing, what the U.S. is doing, what states are doing? We need to get focused on educating every individual we know, which I know is why we have these spaces and we all post content. But personal financial sovereignty, the individual holders of Bitcoin, which is what this was about. It'd be great if the U.S. gets it, but I'm starting to fear that there's too much market control from these big players. But at the end of the day, what can we do about it? Nothing but navigate and buy the dips.
Well, Kelly, can I kind of respond to that? Because I think what you're seeing happen is the same pattern, just at a bigger scale and a deeper scale than has happened in every Bitcoin cycle, which is there are people like yourself at this point who have been awakened to what Bitcoin actually has to offer and its freedom from the state. And there are people who are brought into Bitcoin by actors who aren't as enlightened as well. And they tend to have a bigger reach because it's a pretty niche and fringe point of view that you are enslaved and need to be freed from enslavement. And now, and in the past cycles, we've had altcoiners and we've had all and what's the word I'm looking for? Algorithmic stable coins and ICOs and all sorts of things, NFTs that have brought different niches in. Today we have like the investment class, the boomers, everyone who is a client of BlackRock's and and a client of the clients of BlackRock. So we're getting this big influx. And the awakening message takes time to sink in. And so I think you've got two things going on simultaneously. You've got a lot of activity and care and concern within the Bitcoin community of people who've been awakened to what the possibilities are of Bitcoin. And you've got a whole lot of people who are attracted to it as a get rich quick scheme or a portfolio diversification tool through Wall Street, who have yet to experience the awakening elements of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, even to my own point, I think we all need to look in the mirror sometimes. Even with me saying that or feeling it, we forget that Bitcoin, in these moments that we're impatient, really is what it's all about. We forget that Bitcoin has, I don't want to say an inverse correlation with the US dollar, but it's programmed to act, obviously very different than any fiat system. And so, in my lifetime, consecutively, if you look forward every 3 or 4 years, it's going to be very up and to the right. I think we get so bogged down by the news cycle because all of us, especially those of us here on the panel and those of us tuned into this space, we're so tuned in and sort of inundated with news cycle stories, good, positive, right, wrong, good, that we feel like, I did a post the other day. People feel like the crypto market's not moving. It's up $1 trillion in about a little over a month. It's like, and we're frustrated. Bitcoin is doing incredibly. Looking back from, was it January 2023, back in $16,000, and we're sitting here at 106,000, 107,000, whatever it is right now. I think it's just we're impatient, just being stoked by the never-ending news cycle of super hope and then super fear. Just take a breather, baby.
Hey, the one thing I would like
Well,
to push back on Tomer a little bit is that I don't think that this finance class is in the get rich quick scheme at all.
Agreed.
I think that basically what we're waking up to is a lot of people who have very large amounts of assets in this debt fueled economy are now waking up to the fact that they don't own enough Bitcoin. And I think that's a long run, super bullish thing for Bitcoin. And I would really differentiate it from, get rich quick, you know, um,
So when you say, Fred,
stories.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think it's good to like pat around the idea of I don't own enough Bitcoin. What? Why should I own any Bitcoin? Might be my follow-up question, or like what's the logic behind I don't own enough Bitcoin? Why are they thinking that?
Well, I think the reason is they the hedge to inflation has always been buying equities, right? And right now, I think a lot of people are looking at equities at sort of 22 PE. And there's been a recent chart by JP Morgan saying that, if you buy at a forward PE of 22, your expected net returns over the next 10 years are zero, you know. And so, we're at a point where equities probably aren't going to be a great hedge for inflation. And we also are at a point where they have a year of where they can buy Bitcoin, and they have a year of where this asset in the form of IBIT in particular has done very well. And so I feel like there's a lot of institutional money that's now just starting to appreciate this asset and is starting to feel like the traditional hedges for inflation are not there. So, I think it's a perfect world. Both of these two things coming together means more and more and more people are going to appreciate Bitcoin, and they're going to realize that they don't have enough Bitcoin. And look, the total number is on the order of 0.1% allocation. Like if you take the total money managed by BlackRock, et cetera, and the clients of those people, how much Bitcoin do they have? It's way under 1%. So I definitely think the number in aggregate is really low. And that number in aggregate is going to go up quite a bit over the next 3 to 4 years. So this is my main bull case for Bitcoin right now.
Yeah. So what you're really saying is the narrow case for Bitcoin that it's a great hedge to inflation is the overwhelmingly appealing aspect of it to this very large group of people who may or may not be terribly interested in self-sovereignty and reducing the
I would
power
say
of
they're
government.
not interested, really. Most of these guys are not. They're just interested in it as an inflation hedge.
unfortunately, it really is, a lot of moments and milestones of fear and pain and suffering that do bring people to Bitcoin. It's like you think about Satoshi, ha- you know, coming out of the great financial crisis, and this being a peaceful protest against all of that manipulation and debasement. And you think about, there's so many Bitcoiners in the space that came in when COVID woke them up, right? Including Michael Saylor. And now with what's going on with Israel and Iran, and I was looking at on the news at all these photos and videos of all these cars trying to escape to Iran, and all these people cannot get out. And we always talk about how, look, Bitcoin is freedom money. You can memorize 12 words in your head. Obviously, for us and for most people, that's a terrible strategy for savings. I do not recommend anyone memorize 12 words, but I kept thinking about those people. And it's like, if you live in an area of the world like that, where there are capital controls or the banks are closed and you just have to flee for your life, it's like, what else other than Bitcoin can do that? But at the
Well,
same
Terrence, did you
time,
see today also there was a hack on the one of the main banks in Iran, and they wiped all the data off the. So it's like it's another bull case for Bitcoin. But I think the bull cases, and we get so excited about the bull cases that we forget. I mean, the overwhelming onslaught of the positive news that's come out for Bitcoin. Yes, it's at 106, but it's I guess healthier that the price action is acting quite stable with these massive capital channels coming in, the massive discussions on mainstream financial news outlets and such. But the thing that I don't want to say worries me, I'd love to get some thoughts on this. You, Terrence, and Fred, and Dark Side, if he's gonna, and Puncher as well. Gary, I see you in here as well. Shout out to everybody. Tomer, is the bond market feels very unattractive. I feel like not only is it unattractive, is it going to pick back up steam? We also see the bit of the unwind we saw last year with the Japanese bond market and the yen carry trade, but then also U.S. Treasuries. It's not. It feels like there's focus in other aspects of the market now. Like gold, obviously, has come into pretty wide focus. Bitcoin is this a transitory thing, or a temporary thing, or is this going to persist? I mean, because that has beyond Bitcoin, that has bigger impacts on the way the economy and the financial mechanisms work. Are we in the middle of a reshaping of how people perceive a balanced portfolio?
yeah. And let me just finish one thing that I was saying, and we'll come right back to that. That'll dovetail in nicely, and then we'll get to you, Puncher. Is that over Father's Day, I was at this barbecue with 6 or 7 families, and it was there's a lot of well-to-do families in a well-to-do area, and the subject of Bitcoin came up. And of course, as a Bitcoiner, I was very excited. Cutting to the end, we talked for 2 hours, and they now all have Bitcoin wallets, and they all were smash buying Bitcoin. I could not have gone better. But to start out, we were talking about the war, and I was talking about Iran and Israel, and it didn't register with them. These guys are so privileged and they're so fiat favored. They could care less. Why would I ever need to flee in the middle of the night with my money? Like that doesn't make sense to them. And so I just switched to the Bitcoin treasury companies, and I switched to all the news and all the stuff that they had already been reading and hearing about. And good or bad, that got them excited. And they wanted to get in front. And back to what Fred was saying, they just felt like, how do I get as much as I can? Um, because they already immediately started to see it as a unit of account. When I talked to them about pricing homes and iPhones and everything else in Bitcoin, and that kind of really was jaw dropping for them. Anyways, let's go to you, Puncher. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Interesting conversation. To Tomer's question earlier about people switching from a fiat mindset in business. My business partner in El Salvador, he's an El Salvadoran. He owns a very successful marketing business in Central America. And I've been trying to orange pill him for quite some time. And now he's off zero. He owns a few Bitcoin, and he understands it, or he's starting to. But the shift in his thinking has come. His business is for sale. They want to exit the business. And he was always thinking, in another 2 years, my EBITDA, and I'm just picking numbers out of thin air, will go from 20 million to 30 million. And for those not familiar, EBITDA is generally what a business is sold on, a multiple of your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. So, but in his mind, the other day, he asked me, he said, well, if I wait a couple years to get my EBITDA to go up by 50%, but the dollar is depreciating all the while, like I'm kind of taking one step forward and 2 steps back with regard to my future sale, correct? And I said, well, yeah, actually you are. Like you're going to work to maybe get to a certain EBITDA, all the while you're for certain your earnings, which are denominated in dollars, are depreciating. And then thanks to you, Terrence, because you introduced me to Max Kaiser in our grand opening down there, Max Kaiser and my partner Max and a bunch of guys are working on Max's golf tournament, and he's going to do a lot of sponsorship for it. And he wants to talk to my partner now about going public, his company on the El Salvador exchange, and turn it into a Bitcoin treasury company, flavor of the day, with an underlying business that generates EBITDA that converts into Bitcoin. He can raise 100 million on the exchange and buy Bitcoin with it. And we're going to have that conversation. So yes, people's perceptions once they understand Bitcoin as it relates to business is changing.
Absolutely amazing. Let's go to you, Dark, and then you, Matt, and Tim. Just I know you haven't been formally introduced yet, but you also feel free to jump in. We kind of run this show like The View. We're all just sitting at a desk chiming in on what's happening. Dark, how are you?
Doing great, brother. Good morning.
Are you gonna go make a sandwich for an hour again and leave us hanging, or are you gonna stay with
Mhm.
us?
No, I'm going to stay with you today. Um, yeah, so look, crazy times, right? You've got war, you've got crazy action in the markets. Today seems like silver's the one in the focus, exploding higher to, I guess, a decade-long high. Um, Yeah, I just think there's a lot of rotation right now, and it feels like there's tremendous amount of accumulation. Meaning, one day we'll focus on Bitcoin, one day we'll focus on gold, one day we'll focus on silver, then we'll focus on stocks. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think, to Puncher's point, this concept of these Bitcoin treasuries is just getting started. I think it's going to be a huge driver going forward. And as I've said before, I really look forward to seeing what 21 brings to the table with all kinds of structured products. I think it's going to be a really wild time. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the ride.
Thanks, Dark. How about you, Matt? You want to say good morning?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. There's just one thing I was thinking about earlier, when Fred was talking about some of these people that are, feeling like they don't have enough Bitcoin. Do you think that could also be why we've just seen this kind of relentless bid? No matter what's happened recently, all the crazy events that have gone on, I feel like, at least based on last cycle, if you were around in 2020 when the world seemed like it was going crazy during COVID times, I mean, it felt like the bottom just dropped out from under us, right? We went down like 50% plus, and then it just stayed low for a long time. Didn't really feel like there was a persistent bid. And this just feels completely different to me than that cycle did. I mean, do you think that's what this is just that institutional bid, or do you think it's like an M2 thing, or both? Because I've been watching M2 as well, and I feel like it's been following that really closely this cycle. I'll share the chart in the nest for those of you that haven't seen that. Putting that
Well,
up
man,
right
I think
now.
that the thing is that's different between this cycle and last cycle is who's buying, right? Last cycle, it was, sort of private funds, rich people, sailor buying, grayscale, right? It wasn't, we didn't have the ETF. And that's a really big difference, right? Because as much as we talk about MicroStrategy and Bitcoin treasury companies, most of the buying is still the ETF. It's 2/3 or 3/4 of the buying is the ETF. Okay. And then meanwhile we have, and the ETF does sometimes sell. Those guys have been sellers at times, but it's been pretty relentless as of recently. And then we have this sort of relentless buying, one-way directional buying of Michael Saylor. So I think between the one-way directional buying of Saylor and all these other Bitcoin treasuries, and it's completely one way. All of these companies only buy. They have never sold one Bitcoin. You know, um, Now maybe this thing changes in a year. Maybe David Bailey starts selling some of his Bitcoin to buy shares in Nakamoto if it starts trading below par. I don't know, but right now all this stuff is one-way buying. So even if we have these little dips, uh, we just have this ocean of buying, this wall of buying that's just there that was never there before. And I think this thing's going to carry us quite a bit further this cycle. And when I say cycle, I don't mean 4-year cycle. I mean this bull market, wherever this bull market takes us. I am not one of these people who believe that we absolutely have to go down in 2026 because of we always go down every 4 years. So I just feel like this is noise right now, but the underlying signal is we are on this massive bull market that's probably going to last many, many years, like the gold market did in 2004. That's my thesis. I think we're going probably more or less straight up to a million. That's kind of my thesis, with some 20-30% pullbacks, but no 80% pullback between here and a million. That's kind of my view.
That makes
Justin,
sense. Could I
nice to
just
see you here.
just
Oh,
a
go
quick
ahead, Matt, and then Justin.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
a quick follow up. So this is for Tomer. So you're talking about kind of the philosophical side of things, that hero's journey, let's call it, that people take when they start buying, where maybe they don't really fully understand everything early on, but they're at least intrigued enough to start allocating, right? And then over time, you go through that knowledge pathway, whether it takes a short time or a long time, doesn't really matter. Most people, when they come to Bitcoin, gradually get pulled into the ethos and the principles of the community. And you were kind of talking about that earlier with perhaps some of this institutional buying where people are not there yet. They don't necessarily know what they have, maybe. But I just wanted to maybe challenge or push back on that. Do you really think that if you're an institutional buyer and you're really just there because you feel like you're underweighted in a portfolio, that you're actually going to go through that same journey that an individual would? It seems to me like there might be less likelihood that actually occurs, but I'm curious what you think.
Well, an institution isn't a conscious entity in the same way that a person is. There may be because it's the composition of the decision makers who are individual people at the company, and so they, if they come into Bitcoin to say, this is something to protect our treasury from inflation, and it's a better thing than buying back our shares, or we didn't have the opportunity to buy back our shares because we're not really a public company. They're listening to the Michael Saylor thing. Those individuals begin on that journey to say, well, why is there inflation? And what does it mean to me? And why did I need to diversify out of my national currency? And so they are, like, the individuals are just as likely to embark on the spiritual awakening journey as individuals who are just buying for their own personal sake eventually, which isn't to say, which can and probably will start to transform the nature of institutional financialized entities, but we're at the very early days of that, and I can't predict it with certainty. But I think if the company that you work for announces we're buying a lot of Bitcoin instead of buying back shares, or instead of holding treasuries or cash, this is going to make you aware of Bitcoin and probably make a significant percentage of people, maybe still a minority, but not a negligible minority of people, start to understand Bitcoin. And this is where the flywheel gets going. And it first gets going on its pure monetary value perceived from the fiat world. But the perspective starts to change over time. And so I welcome your pushback, and I volley it back into your court to say it creates more awareness amongst more people. And because it's a slow journey and it's not like this instantaneous, heard about Bitcoin, I get it. It's gonna take time everywhere, but I actually do think it's going to transform the nature of organizations. I think right now there's a little bit of a distraction around thinking you can buy Bitcoin and people will pay you more for your Bitcoin than you people will value you at more than the Bitcoin that you hold. That's this whole treasury company thing. But the idea of companies that build things to last because they have money that will last, because they're not in a race against inflation and depreciation and all those kinds of things, uh, could very well transform our whole civilization back to something that has lots of echoes of the time when gold was money, and people built things to last generations, and they expected and they built their companies to last for generations rather than to be things that you build and exit and sell to some other fool down the road.
Justin, and then Dark.
Like, I'm a little bit out of breath, but to what Fred said, Fred is speaking facts, and the data backs that up. That institutions are buying, and it's only going in one direction. In contrast, we had Eric Trump who got on stage in Las Vegas and said that 50 million Americans own Bitcoin. The entire world wants Bitcoin. That's complete bullshit. You can go to Time Chain Index and see that 0.15 15% of 1% of the global population owns significant Bitcoin, which significant means more than dust. So virtually no one owns Bitcoin. The masses are not going to wake up. If we think retail is going to show up at $150,000, $200,000, they don't have any money. They have zero conviction of Bitcoin. They don't know what it is. So institutions are buying relentlessly. And my message would be to us as individuals that this has got to be the most bullish setup ever for Bitcoin right now. Say at 100,000 to $110,000 risk adjusted, it's the best bet ever. There's no relevant downside risk whatsoever to owning Bitcoin right now. Like, they're all coming for Bitcoin, and you can make the argument that there's always going to be 500,000 to a million Bitcoin on exchanges for sale. The demand is going to outpace that. Institutional buying, they're just now getting it. So I'm surprised that nobody's talking about the fact that so much Bitcoin is flowing from individuals to institutions since the ETF buying, that here we are, we should be buying Bitcoin and locking it up in cold storage because it's what everybody is coming for. So that's what I'm doing, man. If you're in treasuries, companies, and proxies and all that, I sure hope it's a small percentage of your portfolio, because what everybody's going to want is sats. So that's what I'm locking up. And
Yeah, even Charles Hoskinson, even Cardano's coming for Bitcoin. Who knew all the crypto companies would be coming for Bitcoin? Dark, and then back to you, Tomer.
Yeah, I just want to touch on one thing Tomer said, that Bitcoin companies, these treasury companies, are being valued on, more than the Bitcoin they hold. Well, there's a reason for that, right? It's because they're able to sell securities and buy Bitcoin at essentially a discount, because there's something broken in the fiat system, right? I always say that none of this should be happening, right? None of these companies should be valued more than the Bitcoin they hold, unless there's something seriously broken in the existing system. And I think that's what we're seeing. I mean, when Sailor can sell securities, whether it's stock or converts or preferreds, and actually pull off accretive dilution, right? Where you feel like you're being diluted, but you're really not. It's actually an accretive strategy. Well, that speaks to the premium that these companies are trading at. And I think it's important to realize that none of this, again, should be happening. It's happening because the fiat system is broken and people are trying to get money out of the fiat system. And one last thing, we live in an era of monopolies. If you look at the Mag 7, if you look at Sandler speaks to this really well, right? Like, nobody can compete with Apple. Nobody can compete with NVIDIA, right? These companies have achieved monopoly status. And similarly, I believe that Bitcoin is right at the verge of achieving monopoly status. Gary Cardone says no $2 trillion company, no $2 trillion industry has ever failed. And that's true. So, yeah, I think we're in a new paradigm, and people want out of the fiat system, and they are looking for ways to get out. So that's why we're seeing, look at silver today, just ramping, right? Gold ramped, Bitcoin ramps, and then they pull back, right? Because we're still in an accumulation phase. But once that transfers into I want what I can get, watch out to the upside.
All right. I'm going to grab the steering wheel and take us on a little side trip here on this conversation. I want to kind of welcome Tim to the stage. This isn't irrelevant to the conversation that's been had, and maybe in using the word trip, I'm taking a double meaning over here. But Tim is a relatively newcomer to Bitcoin, and I'll maybe let him introduce himself, but he's going to talk about, and we foreshadowed this last week if you were listening. He's going to talk about the similarities between psychedelics and the kind of experience and trip that they lead people down. I'm not just meaning it like you take it and you go on a short trip, but you end up going on a longer trip when you integrate what you've experienced, that takes you out of the world that you've been living in, and exposes you to different kinds of knowledge. And he's drawn a lot of parallels, and I hope he'll be able to take us through them. And many of these things relate and can be integrated back into exactly the things that we've been talking about today. So without spoiling it and saying, let's go on this trip. Welcome, Tim. Why don't you begin by just telling us a little bit about your overall journey, and when something clicked that Bitcoin made sense, and that there was some high degree of similarity between Bitcoin and many of the aspects of how people are using psychedelics, or however
Appreciate
you
it,
want to
Tomer.
present it.
Appreciate it. Just first, thank you for the opportunity to be on here. I see a lot of people I've learned about Bitcoin from, so it's a full circle moment for me. So just very grateful to be in the space. So quick intro. My name is Tim. I'm calling in from Denver today, actually attending the world's largest psychedelic conference, if you haven't heard about it, but typically reside in Costa Rica, and mainly in Costa Rica because of its decriminalization nature for psychedelic experiences. For the last 6 years, I've been hosting psychedelic retreats, mainly geared towards founders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and execs. So the typical type A, and myself going through a lot of experiences, probably over 300 plus in the last 11 years. I decided to invest, a chunk of my career in a chapter of supporting this professionally. Probably supported up to 1,000 people in the last 6 years, and heard a lot of their experiences, awakening experiences, ego death experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And just side note, this is all done in a very like intentional, ceremonial way. And once I finished that chapter, I left late last year. I had a little chunk of time to just kind of ask myself what I want to learn, and that's when Bitcoin started ripping. I actually entered into Bitcoin during COVID, not knowing what I was doing. Fell into the trap of the BlockFi debacle, and so all my Bitcoin was taken, and kind of reassured the story that this was a scam, and left that world. And so it was late last year that I got back into Bitcoin, and like I said, learned a lot from a lot of people in the space and others. And it really clicked for me when I went down the rabbit hole with the Bitcoin Standard and a few podcasts, and listening to people share about this, that I started to notice such a fascinating parallel between a lot of my psychedelic experiences and the feelings that come from that, and the awakening experiences that come from that, and the feeling I was getting with Bitcoin. And I would credit my Bitcoin adoption rate and acceleration velocity directly correlated to the amount of psychedelic experiences I've gone through. If I could point it to like one key thing, it's really the one, people call it ego death. I might call it ego dissolution temporarily during these experiences. I created a presentation, and I've been sharing it with a couple podcasts so far, titling Why Bitcoin is an Ego Test. And we hear and see that a lot. But for me, it really lands in a different way, because a lot of the psychedelic experience is all about questioning the stories and the programming that we've been conditioned with, either from our childhood experiences or how we were raised by our parents, and not to their fault, but just to be aware that there's a lot of passed down programming. And in the case with Bitcoin, understanding money as just the dollar or paper money in our wallets and our banks, not having the curiosity to question it. With my experience with psychedelics, the muscle of asking the hard questions became easier. So the question of what is money became obviously the starting point, and it's not much different than with psychedelics. The beginning question is, who am I really beyond the stories that I hold? And so I just started to draw all these parallels, and decided to create a fun little presentation about it. For those who are interested, it's under the domain URL psybtc.com. So the first three letters of psychedelics, the first, and then the Bitcoin acronym btc.com. So if you want to take a look at it, feel free to. I don't think I'm going to go through all of it today, but happy to answer questions if that's the way we want to go, Tomer. I'm happy
Sure.
to go
I,
down that
I
way.
I see Puncher's hand up. I have one question to kind of kick it off, and then we can go to Puncher and lots of other questions. And hopefully you'll try to remember to refer to your presentation at
I
times.
have it open, so it's all good.
But I like the open format. I think you one of the questions that I hadn't been thinking of asking you, but your introduction made me think of, is like, you've seen lots of these type A personalities, people who've won at the game of life, allegedly. They've got a success. Their egos should be soaring and saying, you did it, you won, you got nothing to worry about. You see them going on these psychedelic retreats. Are they aware of what they're headed into? Why, and most importantly, like, why are they pursuing this when they've already got a fully satisfied ego? Why would they then want to shatter it? Is it that they're unsatisfied with what they've achieved, what winning looks like? Like, I'm just really curious.
Yeah, thank
And,
you for
and I know
asking.
it's not necessarily just one answer, but you've seen a lot of these people. So
Yeah, the
what's
first
going
thing
on
that
there?
yeah, the first thing that comes up immediately, and we've worked with millionaires, billionaires, people who've exited, 8 figures, 9 figures. Believe it or not, a lot of them are just unfulfilled. And believe it or not, a lot of them have come from a programming or a conditioning that they needed to prove something to someone else, maybe their parents. And that's a direct correlation to my story where I became an entrepreneur because I grew up in a single mother with a single mother and wanted to just make her proud and prove to her that a lot of her work didn't go in vain. So I went down a very deep path of just trying to prove myself to the world and to her that I was worthy of that her love, her acceptance. And so believe it or not, this is a lot of the same stories with these executives, CEOs, successful founders who have exited. They come to realize that at the end of the monopoly game, or I use that analogy a lot, uh, they ask what's next. And typically that question begins the perspective of, I've heard about these psychedelic experiences. I've heard people have profound experiences to the point where they compare it to when they first fell in love, or they experienced their first death in their family, or when they were first married, and perhaps there's a pivot point here that can be accessed. And so that's where they're coming in. That's why they're coming in. They're unfulfilled at the end of the at the end of the race, and asking, is this more, there's got to be more to life than what I was told even when I won the monopoly game. So that's what I would say immediately as the kind of key thing I see a lot.
Puncher.
Yeah, Tim, thanks. I find this super fascinating, and I don't want to kind of front run your presentation, but I'm curious. Have you heard of neurofeedback before? Are you
I
familiar
have,
with that?
yes.
So I have a lot of friends who are Navy SEALs and have been through quite a bit. Unfortunately, we've lost a bunch of them through suicide, and I know that a lot of guys like that seek this therapy because nothing else works, and nothing inside the VA is going to help them at all. But I kind of liken it a little bit to what you're talking about, except for in neurofeedback, they usually go around the trauma in your brain. Your brain is chemical and it's also electrical. And a lot of the pharmaceutical companies try to treat things chemically with, there's no curative thing. It's just suppressing, I guess, emotions, or I don't even know how a lot of these pharmaceuticals work. But with neurofeedback, they change and reroute your brain patterns around the damaged areas or those loops that keep you in addiction or keep you in depression or anxiety or whatever they are. Um, and I personally have done it and have had just a life-changing result. So I'm curious if there are similarities between neurofeedback and what you're seeing from the psychedelic experience as well.
Yeah. So I'm not an expert in neurofeedback, so I'm not going to speak from that perspective. But from what I understand, I've tried it a couple times, and the general kind of similarities to psychedelics, with psychedelics specifically, there's something called the default mode network, which is essentially our muscle memory, like when we're driving and we can, like, listen or talk. We don't have to fully focus on just driving. It's what's on autopilot. And a lot of our lives we're in that consciousness. Psychedelics interrupts that temporarily, which basically means, in layman terms, how can I take myself out of the stories, the narratives that I currently always think about, that I think I am, and take a temporary moment to step out of that and be able to see life from a whole different perspective, and ultimately welcome a different perspective and story about who I am and in my life. And so you can, bring this back into something like Bitcoin, where when we can start to ask the questions about what story did I inherit from my parents or family about money, that's where that rabbit hole starts to begin. And just to bring some ideas and perhaps spark a conversation, I've thought a lot about how psychedelics can be, in an intentional way, be a powerful accelerant to, let's say people who don't know what Bitcoin is, to be able to question old money stories with the aid of psychedelics in a very intentional setting. And that's just one way, right? Obviously, right now, psychedelics in a global setting is really treating the traumas and the clinical settings. I've been operating in the non-clinical setting, which basically means, with leaders who are unfulfilled and wanting to understand what's next, post-exit or successful, exit of their company. What's next? These are non-clinical outcomes. I think there's a fascinating, thought thought experiment I'm playing with of, could a microdosing of psilocybin, which is quite accepted in the psychedelic community and probably around the US more and more, what if you paired that with a very specific focus, like understanding money from all different angles, and ultimately come to what I think will be an ultimate conclusion of sound money like Bitcoin? So just want to throw that in the room and see if that sparks any questions too. But
Well,
if
well,
anybody
Tim,
wants to look at the real quickly, if anyone wants to look at the presentation, go to that and see if you want to ask any questions about that. Happy to answer as well.
Tim, the fact that you brought up the fact that you can temporarily step out of your worn
Default
patterns,
mode.
right? Your default mode.
Correct.
That's very much like neurofeedback, except it takes time to rewire your brain
That's
around
right.
those damaged areas. So that's why I made that connection. And for those who aren't familiar, like my Navy SEAL buddies, they've seen some horrible things, and they say to me that it's like a Memorex or a tape player or a video that's playing constantly in their mind, back to that moment or back to those things, and they can't turn it off. So they try to get around it by drinking or taking drugs or whatever,
Numbing.
just and at numbing the pain, right? And then when you can rewire or temporarily step out of it, it sounds like through psilocybin, that allows you to rewire around the damaged area, and that holds true for addiction and drug addiction, and they're having unbelievable results with children with autism. So it's super fascinating to me, and I'll just stop there. But I do see a lot of similarities in what we're talking
I
about
do
here.
too. I do too. And that's why I brought up that default mode network example. And again, just to ground it back into this space all around Bitcoin, you can draw that similar parallel of what if you point the psychedelic microdosing or intentional experience in questioning or rewiring our money beliefs and money programming. And that is what my experience has been, and why I was able to adopt Bitcoin so much quicker than, let's say, a normal person, because that muscle of take a step out of the normal reality and be able to see things from a whole different perspective really helped land the concept of Bitcoin for me.
Tommy boy.
Yeah, my question is, when in the psychedelic experience, how do you ascribe that you're altering your consciousness versus hallucinating, and how do you make that determination?
Yeah, I think right off the bat, I think um, people can say it's hallucinations, people can say it's, altered state of consciousness. I think there are certain things under our control that will guide the experience to be more of a altered state that can be very beneficial over just another random hallucination. So for example, the famous words of set and setting in the psychedelic space comes really handy here, where if you're in a psychedelic altered state, at the comfort of your home with an eye shade over your eyes, with really beautiful melodic music playing in the background. You're not distracted with conversations, and you're just going inwards. This is where I think, yeah, you might have a hallucination, but because you have more intentionality of the setting around you, plus the intention of what you want to explore within ourselves, that's where the alter state, I guess, label starts to come more alive. Because in psychedelics, I think I've learned deeply is that what we believe, we become. So if we believe it's a hallucination and it's not handy, then it's going to be your reality, and that's going to be true for you. But there is a possibility that that hallucination could be a powerful message, if you want to put it that way, that could be, related to the intention of, I want to reconnect with my deceased mother or grandmother who I haven't spoken with in a while. That's where that can start to come in more correlated. But again, the set and setting comes very big here, that really helps shape that kind of interpretation for individual.
Hobart.
What's up? Thanks, Terrence. I wanted to jump into that. This is a great conversation, and I love how psychedelics and consciousness always comes up in Bitcoin circles if you just give it enough time. But there's one thing I wanted to inject into the conversation here. Thomas, your question about how to determine between consciousness and a hallucination, I think requires a little bit more parsing out. So how do you actually, I have a question to you. How do you parse out whether your consciousness is not a hallucination itself? because the problem with this kind of framing is that everybody's body is a receiving mechanism for actual like electrical signaling of receiving data of the environment with which you find yourself in. So there is a potential here for people to be. So one of the what I'm kind of getting at here is that individuals struggle to really kind of like identify their own environment. When you go from being someone who is sedentary to uh, picking up a more intense regime or regimen, a lot of people tend to realize that once they're using their body more, they're able of picking up more information. So as you increase your activity and you increase your awareness with your body and your understanding of your body and paying attention to more of the signaling that you're receiving on a consistent basis, the individuals that begin working out more tend to realize that they can actually sense, they can feel on their skin when cool, humid air is flowing through the area and they weren't aware of that kind of signaling before. So like when we're talking about like the consciousness stuff, we have to be aware of the fact that there is a lot of information that we're receiving and we're actually kind of like dissecting and deciphering that we're not aware of. So like when we get into the consciousness stuff, we really need to be just aware of the fact that we there's a high likelihood that we have a like kind of like what who was it? Tim was saying. There's a very it gets very woo, very kind of theoretical physicist type stuff, like with Russell Targ, getting into the fact that there's a push and pull mechanism to the ether of reality, to where like he was saying, like if you truly believe something, you will start to see some very very wild outcomes at the end of it.
So, Mike, I was making the distinction between like. So let me unpack what I might behind my question. If you take mushrooms, LSD, or DMT, there's certainly a heightened awareness that's part of the hallucinating, and so sounds and things you see and things you notice, that's not the kind of consciousness adjustment that I was really speaking of. The one that I found very interesting, now I've never done it, by the way, and I'm not inclined to do it, but I do want to understand it. People have taken DMT, and what has happened with DMT is two people take it in the same proximity. They're not communicating during their trip, if you will, but in the debrief, they saw the same thing, uh, the elf on the shelf, if you will, or they saw whatever the hell was there, suggesting that there is an altered state of consciousness that allows people to see things that are there versus uh, just a reprocessing of what's already in your brain.
Yeah, yeah, and Thomas, I actually know a handful of guys do it that have consistently gone on their own little like psilocybin mushroom trips that have gotten to the point of with intense mushroom trips, like I'm talking like 10 grams plus. These guys can both report similarly to the DMT situation you're talking about. These guys not only report back of interacting with each other in this state, but having like full, like very calm conversations like we're having right now. Like these guys being able to talk about this stuff is just, and like the DMT that you brought up, like I think is like particularly fascinating. But I don't want to hijack the conversation. I see Matt's guy's hand up.
I wanted to add something real quickly that I thought could also bring some interesting thoughts and conversations. And credit to Fred, thank you for inspiring me on this one. I think, especially me as a millennial, I think we've been gifted three paradigm shifting technologies that will fundamentally alter the trajectory of our lives. The first one, obviously, in my world is psychedelics. The second one is Bitcoin. And the third one is AI. And I find these three technologies that are so paradigm shifting because if one kind of can extrapolate it, one thing I find so fascinating about each of these technologies is their what I call egoless nature. It's that there's no one individual, or at least a human ego, that's in full control of these technologies. And so it really begs the question of like, how do we approach understanding these altering paradigm shifting technologies? And a lot of it comes back down to what I've learned with psychedelics is our intention. So what's the direction we want to take this altered state of experience towards? And so similarly, when you guys just said two people saw the same thing, I would say one thing that helps with that is what is the intention that these people wanted to explore, that they came to a very similar conclusion. And I think as we approach Bitcoin and AI and these technologies, I always remind people, and even myself, like, yeah, these can be absolutely scary, but it's the intention that we come in with, in terms of the love, the intention, the compassion that we're coming in to contribute to these technologies. I think will make all the difference. So I just wanted to put that in the room as well.
Why don't you respond, Fred, before we go to Matt and then Lana?
Yeah, look, I'm all for, experimenting with psychedelics at one point in your life. I've done it in the past. I've taken LSD a long, long time ago. And I wouldn't put it up there with Bitcoin and AI though, as far as things that, core new technologies. I really wouldn't. It's you want to put those on the equal pedestal, go ahead. I do think that the way I would rank AI as far more transformative than Bitcoin ultimately. The question was, how do you interact with AI? I would say code right now, but I think at the end of the day, it's really w- how it's not going to be so much how smart you are or what you know. It's going to be how you can relate to machines that are smarter than you and that can process that knowledge better than you very soon. Because I feel like the you know the ability of individuals to crack knowledge that they've learned, for example, like I did getting a PhD at Stanford, that is going to be very surpassed very quickly by machines. And so what's going to be important now is how do you relate to these machines? How can you talk to the machines? And talking to machines is a skill and an art in and of itself. So start talking to machines in their language, which is code. That's my
And AI will want to use Bitcoin as the most fair money possible because
100%.
yeah, and it'll want to use that Bitcoin when you're buying mushroom pizza. So there, I tied it all in for you. Let's go to Matt.
Just a really quick point, kind of to Fred's thing. I worked with someone on when Mid Journey was like just first coming out, who published a graphic novel using Mid Journey, and although everyone said you can do it, very few people managed to do it, let alone make it look particularly beautiful. And this particular person, in doing so, was microdosing LSD for like a full 21 days to author this thing and to learn how to speak to the computer, and found it quite helpful. So again, I really, I don't want to push LSD, but I'm just trying to, like, if Fred's challenge is how do we talk to computers, well, when we do
But
it
I
in the
agree with you, Tomer. Like you need to get out of your element to even want to talk to computers, right? So I feel like, some amount of like, let's throw whatever you think you know out the window. And I think that's the key, and I think that's the key to understanding AI is like, let's stop with the idea that we're smarter than AI. Let's start with the idea that maybe actually AI is smarter than we are. And I think that's a very good place to go. And maybe some of these psychedelics gets you there,
yeah.
right? Because
I think what's interesting about AI is it's the first time we've had a non-human entity that we can talk to in English. And like we've just never had that before. You can talk to your dog and it kind of cutely tilts its head and looks up at you, and it'll understand when you say you want to go for a walk. But you can't you can't say, can you create for me a chart that shows the M2 money supply divided by the price of gold over the last 40, like, the dog will still look just as cute as you, but you're not going to get a response back in English. This is the first time we've had something like that that's a non-human consciousness to do it. And so
and so
we're
many people could discover Bitcoin now, not because of us in Bitcoin today or whatever thing, but they probably can discover Bitcoin by talking to AI, right? I mean, that's going to be the next orange pillar, will be ChatGPT.
that'd be interesting. Let's try to bring this back around. I don't know if Tim, I don't know who's next, or if Tim wanted to jump in with something. I am hoping that we start, like, we're talking about psychedelics kind of on their own, which is interesting. I'm curious to bring the parallels, because that's really what Tim's presentation is about, and where I think he's put a lot of thought into this. That's quite intriguing. and less ambiguous and focused. So maybe we can go. Maybe Tim, you can list off like 2 or 3 things that you
Sure.
identified at the top of your presentation, and then that'll help focus the conversation on Bitcoin and psychedelics.
Yeah, I'll share a few very quickly. And again, if you guys want to take a look at the actual website, scibtc.com, and see if you have any questions on each of them, feel free to jump in. But the first one I put in, for example, was only when you're ready, which basically means, my job is never to convince anybody to take psychedelics. We say psychedelics finds you when you're ready to meet yourself. And I think the similar is with Bitcoin. Bitcoin clicks when your old money story and illusion cracks, right? And so it's this idea that both invite us to arrive when we're meant to, not before. Awakening is not scheduled nor forced. It's this summoning. It's this calling. And yes, I'm bringing in a little bit of a spiritual lens into all of this, but I definitely felt this experience as an example for this one. Another one that I thought was really similar to what Bitcoin operates from, is that the core get to the core question, which is when we fix the money, we fix the world. In psychedelics, there's a very similar line here that says "heal yourself, heal the world." And when we think about heal yourself, heal the world, it's really how we start to change how we relate to others and the world. There's a great quote from Graham Hancock that he believes that every politician should drink ayahuasca at least 12 times before taking office, because the ability to relate to others starts to become more activated. And again, with Bitcoin, when we fix the money, we fix the world. It's changing the incentive structures that steers the markets, the politics, and the culture. So those are just 2 immediate ones that really, I think, start to get the parallels understanding. And then if you guys want to see more, it's all on the page, and feel free to ask any questions there.
Matt, you're finally up, unless your hand is down. Then we can go to Lana if not.
Well, mine was a much earlier question, but I won't take us back because I know Tomero kind of wanted to go to relating the two. So I just maybe would share a quick story, not a personal story, but a story from my brother actually, who was habitual user, arguably maybe abuser of marijuana to the point where it was demotivating, and that was kind of all he wanted to do was just smoke, right? And he had a DMT experience in which he basically realized that he was abusing it. It was a detriment to his life, and he stopped smoking that day and never touched it again. He went in with zero intent for anything like that to occur, yet it did anyways. And I think that is just a really interesting parallel to the Bitcoin piece because I think for me, for example, I had no intent of learning about the banking system or how the Federal Reserve works or any of that, right? I had no intent to cold turkey quit fiat, yet I get drawn into this world and just can't really leave it. And I feel like the parallels there are just really interesting because I've heard of a lot of experiences with people with at least high levels of psychedelics. I've only had a couple of experiences with psilocybin myself, so I'm not super well versed here, but I can at least draw some parallels. So I just think that's interesting and maybe wanted to toss that out there, see what you guys think, because that's the best parallel that I could think of is just even if you're going in with no intent at all, I think in both cases, they can kind of completely transform who you are as a person.
Just want to speak to that real quickly. If we, go with the Matrix movie analogy here, the red pill versus the blue pill, in the psychedelic space, the red pill represents the psychedelic itself. No different than Bitcoin represents the orange pill. So your example there really draws that conclusion for me. Like, I never had an interest in learning Federal Reserve banking and all this, macroeconomic stuff. But it's only until I took the orange pill that it really opened up my eyes. And that's very similar to someone, quote, taking a red pill representing psychedelics to start to examine oneself, like your example with that individual who perhaps maybe looked at himself a little bit deeper than before, realizing that he was perhaps abusing marijuana in that case. So I draw a little similar parallel. It's one of those in the presentation where Bitcoin represents the orange pill, obviously, but psychedelics represents the red pill.
Lana, what's on your mind? Then we'll go to Puncher.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We hear you
Oh,
perfectly.
Good.
Yep.
So I've been a Bitcoiner since like 2018. I mean, I knew about it earlier, but the last 20 years I've been a practicing psychotherapist. Worked with all sorts of populations, veterans, couples, and now just individuals. And so what I want to say is, so psychedelics are very interesting. I've worked with people that not were actively on them, but have taken them, and it's a way to enlightenment, but not the only way. I think that sometimes we think that it's a substance that causes us to get there to wake up, but sometimes it can also be a person or breath work or another modality that isn't as extreme, because a trip does wake a person up to maybe to their reality of what's real and what they are, and like ego, like losing your ego, feeling one with the universe. But it's not sustainable, so that when you come out of it, you have a memory. And my opinion is to find ways to get there without the substance. And that is the real power, because if you're dependent on the substance, then you have to keep taking it, and the substance is the bypass, I think. It's good because it gets you there right away, but you can bypass. So, and then being a psychotherapist and seeing people that do take sometimes too much or have a bad reaction, because everybody's brain chemistry is ultimately different. Marijuana can make someone paranoid based on their brain chemistry, um, but other people feel relaxed, and so same with other drugs. So, and the thing is, you don't know until you actually take it. And people say, well, it's the setting, but now we know that it's not just the setting or the vibe, it's also someone's actual brain chemistry. If they're prone to bipolar, then a some kind of chemical opens those channels and they have an episode, and then they have to get hospitalized. Marijuana is not so good for teenage boys, because it can lead to schizophrenia for some reason. So that's just my word of caution, although I know psychedelics are a very powerful tool for that. And then with Bitcoin, to relate it to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is truth, and waking up to the reality of who you are is also truth, and it's the same truth, because at the end of the day, our unconscious runs our life, and whatever goals we have, whether it's to be successful, uh, or other goals, identifying, are they conscious, or is there an unconscious part of our ego, our personality, that's steering our life? Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
If I could just jump in and react to one of the things that you said much later in your comments. It's like Bitcoin psychedelics are very much a personal awakening, and Bitcoin can certainly awaken you to a lot of personal things. And I've written a lot about how it lets you see your true self, and that's the ultimate prize at the end of the day. But part of the path is Bitcoin really lets you understand a lot about social interactions, and it provides this different model of how we can relate, interact, transact with one another than the model that we've all grown up with, and that we therefore often presumed was the only model. And that shattering of how, where money can come from, what money is, what the supply of it is, who
Mhm.
issues it, why they're issued it, how it's spent, like that whole change of social interconnection, is really profound, and it helps you see who you are within the context of actually seeing what society is, and not just who you are and what society is, but who you could be and what you could be and what society could be. And I think that's where this tremendous hopefulness in Bitcoin comes out through, because it's as if people interacted with each other by these rules, and bad people couldn't stop these rules from applying. We could live in a much better world, and we could be much more ourselves. So it then becomes incumbent upon us to discover ourselves through whatever means we choose, and turn out to be
But it
effective
sounds
for
like,
us.
Tomer, that Bitcoin never got you off the treadmill. I can tell you're still on the treadmill. I hear you out of breath over there.
I'm walking in a forest that I previously walked through on psychedelics, but I'm completely straight and sober right now. But I'm walking up a few big hills right now.
Wanted to
Can,
quickly
can I?
Oh, can I just add real quickly on that? I want to say, just like Bitcoiners say, not financial advice. I'm also in the perspective where psychedelics are not meant for everybody, and perhaps not for everybody in certain lifetimes either. And so, I put an Easter egg at the end of the presentation where I basically invite people to replace the word psychedelics with the word spirituality, or if others want to call consciousness exploration. And I think that's really the point of this presentation, or this thought experiment. Like, psychedelics is definitely one way to ground it, but really representing a bigger concept of spirituality, of getting to know oneself deeper, exploring our consciousness and our inner world much more, and drawing the parallels to that with Bitcoin. But psychedelics is just one approach with that as well. Thank you.
Puncher, let's go to you. Sorry, it's been a while.
Tim, did you want to respond to Lana's
No, I
insight?
just did. That was that's my
Okay,
response. Yeah.
got it. So, Bitcoin, a lot of the times our frustration with trying to orange peel people comes from their inability to break out of what they think they know to be true. My friends who are worked on Wall Street, for example, or friends who've been successful, they just can't break out of those well worn and rigid paradigms. So it sounds like a lot of these things we're talking, and but when somebody does come to Bitcoin, it's almost like something shook them out of it. Something happened to them that allowed them to perceive things differently, and then they were open to Bitcoin. And I think that that's what's happening here, whether it's neurofeedback, which creates new pathways. As an example, I wasn't very good at math before I did neurofeedback, and then all of a sudden I was weirdly good at just doing math in my head, or I could connect dots with business. I can't tell you how powerful it's been in helping me be successful in business, being able to connect people and dots and situations and things like that. That all came about from neurofeedback. So I think that, psilocybin or these psychedelics are a little more, they allow very quickly for someone to break out of those paradigms, see things that they couldn't see before, and then make the changes in their life that they need to make. And it's exciting. It's much more powerful, right? Therefore, much more caution should be taken when going down that route. It sounds like Tim and his team are very cognizant of that. But that's what's exciting. It allows people to break out of these almost, I don't know what the word is, just kind of ground down, very very rigid paradigms that people have in their life, and see things that they heretofore could not see.
I think that's really the message here. Like, yeah, we are built with our own stories and realities, and we might not ever need psychedelics. Meditation might be enough for us to just take ourselves out of those stories, to be able to see ourselves from a 10,000 feet view, whether it's neurofeedback, whether it's psychotherapy, whether it's all these healing art modalities, I would say. I think that's what the invitation really is, that we practice these so that we can be aware of the perhaps rigidity of the stories that we hold, and perhaps work out the muscle of, can we have the courage to question them? And then when we do, then you can apply it to all facets of our life, including our health, but also then in this money pillar around Bitcoin. So that's really that focus of this talk or this presentation.
Tim, I think that's
Okay,
different. I think that's
so
different than
guys, just
FOMO
really quick.
than trauma. Trauma is a different thing. Like, working in Wall Street for years and then not being open to Bitcoin, that's one thing. But when you're abused as a child, or you're a Navy SEAL who's seen and done things, or those types of things, I think require a much more dramatic solution. I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning. There's like the clinical outcomes and the non-clinical outcomes. I've been focusing more in my career on the non-clinical outcomes, but still very aware and cognizant of the clinical outcomes, like you just mentioned. So thank you.
Tomer, did you want to
I just
go
wanted to point.
before? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you check the nest, I'm walking through the forest. I just came across some bright orange mushrooms. I don't know if that's but I posted a picture in the nest. I've never seen anything like them before.
Probably don't eat those.
Too late. Crap.
Unsupervised, welcome to the stage. What say
Hey,
ye?
well, so I'm kind of, I guess, piggybacking a little bit on what Lana was talking about and Puncher, and that's going more to the trauma side of the benefits for the more for people that have had trauma. And there's acute trauma, which would probably fall more into line with what Puncher's experienced with his buddies, where it's one or two big events that were very traumatic, and your body I've studied this a lot. My family's had a lot of complex trauma, and I'm sure Lana could talk about this much more intelligently. But I've done neurofeedback. I've rented a machine and did that and shared it with my sisters, some of my sisters in my family, and I've done hyperbaric therapy, which is another. It helps a lot of veterans. Very expensive. I've been a little afraid. I've done EMDR, um, and then I haven't tried the hypnosis. There's like so many different modalities to help heal the neurological body from trauma, because cognitive therapy can only take you so far, because our body gets rewired to trauma and it's stored and it's trying to unwire that, and it can be complicated. But I've been interested. I've tried microdosing because I'm afraid of a trip. I'm afraid of that loss of control. And because some trauma is more complex, and anyway, I just wanted to toss that out there, that if for people that have had complex trauma, it, it, it's probably be cautious of that, because I think that can sometimes be a bad experience for people and maybe not healing in the way that they're hoping. And anybody's feedback on that is more than appreciated.
Learning to let go is probably one of the hardest things to do, especially if you're somebody who has pushed through a lot of different kinds of difficulty. Because unsupervised, that's something that I've been using my own personal experience with delving into psilocybin and going on these journeys. I think that's probably the hardest part for me, is learning how to just like legitimately let go. And I had a difficulty trying to conceptualize how individuals were talking about letting go, and after going down a couple of times, I've realized that it really just means like fully relaxing and almost letting myself go to sleep, and then I get the exposure of the trip and the journey. Now, like the lucid trip of being able to wrangle control of it while also like letting go, like that's probably the hardest part now. But I just wanted to chime in and let you know, it's like you're definitely not the only one that struggles with being able to let go so you can have the proper experience you're looking for.
Hey
Lana,
guys,
did
real
you want to
quick.
respond? Oh, go ahead, Justin.
Just curious, Tim or unsupervised, if you guys have heard about craniosacral therapy, because I had a friend who went down to New Zealand to a clinic down there and went through that, and it was an absolute turning point in his life, and absolutely miraculous what it did for him. And I forget exactly what the lady does, but no substances involved at all. Um, but if you're scared of drug trips, like I am, who has suffered a harrowing drug trip in 2013, never getting close to it again. But the craniosacral stuff is pretty intriguing. It can also be pretty daunting to go through the whole process, kind of like maybe a seems that a parallel in drugs would be ibogaine or something like that, that you are not going to enjoy it at all, but you come out and release everything almost in a physical way, the trauma that is built up. So
It's energy work, right? Isn't that kind of I've
yes, it
heard of it,
does
but I
tap
haven't.
into
Okay.
energy stuff and
Yeah.
massage, and she's also um, somehow with words getting you to almost in a like you're hypnotized. Um, but yeah, craniosacral is what it's called. There's people. I think it's kind of a growing practice, and there's people in U.S., Canada, Mexico, Europe, New Zealand who are doing that now, and some have amazing experiences.
Rusty.
Well, maybe we should bring up an expert on that at some other point in time. One of the things I was going to say, unsupervised, is in Bitcoin we have this saying, don't trust, verify. I remember when I was undergoing supervised psychedelic treatment, it was almost the exact opposite. It was trust the medicine, surrender to it, which is that relax, and then you'll receive the message that it has to offer. So there's also some interesting contrasts that relate to this topic of trust. But I think it's the same thing. Like if you trust Bitcoin enough to have a good close look at it, and you surrender to what it has to teach you, you'll receive its message as well. So it's another one of these Bitcoin paradoxes, right? The Bitcoin says don't trust, but you have to suspend your disbelief in the unbelievability of its promises to see that it actually delivers on its promises. But you have to study a whole bunch of different areas, which you can't have a simultaneous eureka moment over all of them. It's like you're learning one piece at a time, while you have to trust that the other pieces are going to resolve themselves. So I thought I'd bring that up, given that we were talking about this surrendering into trust.
Well, and Tomer, to like, that's also one of the reasons why Shane and I are trying to build out this Brave Mission protocol for helping veterans with the PTSD stuff, because like there is there's it's funny how spiritual and like philosophically you can get with all this stuff. There is very much like a yin and yang. Like you have to surrender control, but you also want to do it in a kind of like controlled type of environment, because you don't want to just let everything go, right? So like we're
Absolutely. Yeah. You want to do it in an area that you know is safe to begin with.
yeah, and that's precisely why we're working on building out a protocol to where we take vets up with other vets that have done this stuff, they've been down more than a number of times, to the point of where we're taking these guys out to the wilderness to like kind of like get them away from the control of the urban environment, to also kind of control their mindset and be able to keep them calm. But then also the fact that like we want these guys with individuals that they trust, but will not only be able to keep them safe while they're under, but will also be able to keep themselves from putting the individual into a level of danger. Because like when you obviously when you're going to have guys that are trained to kill going into these experiences, and then they have a difficulty of parsing out reality when they come out. Because I can tell you, when I came out of my first 5 gram dosage, uh I it took me probably 20 minutes to realize that I was actually back here and not in the dream space. So like you don't really, yeah, you don't want guys panicking like that. But yeah, like this, I just love this topic. This is a great conversation, guys.
All right, Rusty, you're finally up. Sorry about that.
All good. Can y'all hear me?
No, we can't hear you.
Okay. No, so my dad is a pharmacist. Well, he's retired, but and my whole family's medical. My brother-in-law is a pharmacist, and thing is it's funny. A lot of them are not into medicine whatsoever. I think because they've just seen it throughout the years of just the addiction, everything else, and they have been really looking. My brother-in-law, my dad, he loves to overeat and work out everything, and he's been looking into psilocybin and microdosing. And I asked him, and he believes it's going to be the next big breakthrough. The other one I was going to speak to, and I'm not prescribing this. This is just coming from a very conservative person to people that you wouldn't think would believe that, but the other was CBD. My wife's best friend, her daughter, was she's she's mute. She can't speak, but she was at a point where she was frustrated because she couldn't speak. They began giving her CBD. This was about 2 years ago. It is a night and day difference. It's wild. She has autism, and it's crazy to me that simple switch, and I just can't even tell you. You'd have to have been around her before and after. It's wild. But and how this goes into Bitcoin, well, I can tell you it's easier to orange pill people who because I have done it with a lot of friends who are very into the psychedelic world, especially a lot of musician friends. And yeah, it's a interesting topic, but I did want to say that. So just thanks for letting me speak, guys.
Lana, I think you're the only hand up right now.
Thanks. Okay. I just wanted to say two things. First is to comment on what Unsupervised said. For trauma, there's something called somatic experiencing, and it's a form of psychotherapy that works on the body, as well as something called bioenergetic analysis. It's all about accessing chronically held trauma that's stored in our tissues. And it's very effective. Now, the most important thing is finding a practitioner that you resonate with, and also for cranial sacral therapy, it's all about who you go to. So if something feels off, it's okay to change practitioners, because that could be your intuition telling you that maybe this is not the person for you. And the person, and learning how to feel what's right for you and what's not for you. So that was number one. And then number two was to take it back to Bitcoin. um, and and that's so, and this might be a little bit out there, um, so I apologize if it's a little weird. So uh, so according to some belief, we are all one consciousness. There's no separate self. And sometimes people on a psychedelic trip get that awareness that we're really just one part of one. And uh, the ego, who we think we are, is just living a dream. And in this dream, you are your character, and you have a name and you have an identity. And then on the psychedelic trip, you lose that identity and you're part of one whole consciousness. And from that space, no, things that we think are real are not, like money and uh, and ego and all of these things. They're not real. But it's getting to that level to see from there, from up there, to what you're here. So um, one way that I orange pill people, friends of mine, is to take in information from them. Usually they'll share what they're struggling with. And recently, I'm in Southern California, and it's quite expensive to live here, and all my friends are struggling somewhat, to the point that when they're single ladies, middle age, when they're looking to date, they're assessing, well, is this person a good provider? Like that's the first thing they're thinking. And and it's quite sad, because men that would normally get a chance, they don't, because of that. And so slowly, when I get my friends over to Bitcoin, it's starting, the ones that got in a few years ago, it's a non-issue now, because they have this safety net that they know is going to grow, and they can actually date people they like, not somebody that's successful because they are in fight or flight, because they're in the helping fields, they're in nursing, teachers, and they're all having a very hard time financially. So that's what I wanted to say. So Bitcoin really, it puts you out of fight or flight, and it really does make your life better. Thanks.
What Lana put there, I think it goes really well here. You know, I've really well connected in the psychedelic practitioner field, but beyond that, I see the greater community of the healing arts facilitators, those who are doing energy work, craniosacral, hosting neurofeedback experiences. One thing I've noticed from a philosophical perspective is a lot of them are also in fight or flight. In layman terms, a lot of them are broke or struggling with money. And I thought a lot about this, where if they choose to adopt something like Bitcoin, I really think that the purity of their service becomes that much more magnified, in that they can actually serve what they desire to without necessarily needing to feel like I need to make the next sale, which often puts, a pressure on the individual, which in essence, in the healing art space, I've always believed that my job is never to sell someone on something to heal themselves. They got to feel the call, and they will pay me what they can, especially from a sliding scale or donation basis. And that's not against other people who don't do that. But my point is, the healing arts facilitators or practitioners who are already in service and want to practice more with even greater purity, I think Bitcoin unlocks that for them. So I just wanted to plant that based on what Lana just shared there as well.
Dog said,
Yeah, hey guys, how you all doing today?
we're having
I
a
just booked
Bitcoin Spaces.
Bitcoin Spaces. Yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting you guys at Bitcoin Alpha. I just got my tickets, so I'll be going to Santa Monica in October. So that's going to be nice. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking through this conversation, Bitcoin and, higher consciousness, spirituality, you know, connectivity. I had some trauma back when I was younger as well, and I remember going through therapy, hypnotherapy. I learned about chakras. I learned about the Kundalini. I learned about prayer. I got into psychedelics, and I gotta say that. One of the advantages of surrendering, because I think, as I think back on my experiences, and really how liberating it was. It really is a matter of understanding the ego, and understanding why we have an ego, why it's important, but also how you're able to disconnect from your ego, how the ego doesn't really define who you are. It just allows you to live, and live in this, in this 3D reality where we are, either working, providing for our family, investing in Bitcoin, whatever. But when you truly accept that you want to transcend the ego, it is a really liberating feeling. And one of the things I remember was is that I think the scenery is always the most important. I also found that at nighttime, being outside was always the preference, because you're able to close your eyes, and you're able to basically, connect with the vibration of nature, the sound of nature. And obviously, there's two ways of doing it. One is with your friends. You're having fun, you're having a bonfire, and you're basically having a very profound collaborative experience. But there's also like a personalized healing mechanism where if you do it alone, there are really advantageous effects for your own self. And I think now that I look back, and now how I'm able to uh, connect internally, I kind of just pray the rosary now. And I go to I go to church or whatnot. But praying the rosary and meditating on the on that mantra over and over and over again, it does allow for me to be at ease, me to undertake this day to day hustle with grace, be considerate of other people, always giving back when I can. And how it kind of relates to Bitcoin in my own mind is that the spiritual way is the only way, right? This physical reality that we live in is temporary. And, as soon as we can connect, spiritually, we really understand, how we really all are all the same. It doesn't matter what continent you're in. We all just want to, live this life with grace and happiness, and with those that we love. Um, and I think it's a very nice thing. And similarly, when you find Bitcoin, you find um you find the North Star. You find the direction where this constant hustle, the constant rat race. you know you're working hard, you're stressed, you got customers, you got bills to pay, but then you have this like mechanism in parallel where the value of this mechanism is growing faster than what I'm able to provide on this physical hustle. And so I think that like liberation, it basically now has allowed me to work harder, right? Earn more money, but only because that extra money that I'm earning, I'm putting it into Bitcoin. And so week over
So,
week,
Doc said,
yes,
sorry
sir.
to interrupt you. Tim has to go shortly, so as our guest, I just wanted to give him an opportunity to give some closing comments and say goodbye. I'm going to have to go in about 5 minutes as well, so I definitely want to thank people for entertaining this side quest that's a little bit less about what we usually talk about, but hopefully still connecting in some way and enlightening. So thanks for your comments, Doc. I don't mean to interrupt you, but we just have limited time, and I'll turn it over to Tim to say what he wanted to say.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you all for the opportunity to share this. I guess I could say I'm just another pleb that understood Bitcoin and wanted to contribute to this space from a different angle. Hopefully, this was entertaining or enlightening at best. I did want to just share one last parallel that I found. I left it at the end of the presentation as the last one on purpose. And I think it really speaks to just what the bigger picture of all of this is, why we're here, why we adopt Bitcoin, why we look within ourselves. And I call this the sacred parallel is the stewards of the next 7 generations. Psychedelics gives us the courage to face the pain our ancestors couldn't. It cuts the chain of inherited trauma, and it gives our descendants a new story written with conscious choice instead of unconscious programming. And again, like we talked about today, this could be any healing arts modality, not just psychedelics, but I think you get the point that what it can do. And with Bitcoin, the parallel is that it allows us to store our time and energy in a monetary form that preserves the generational wealth, enough to retire an entire bloodline, immune to decay, entropy, and manipulation. So these technologies stretch our vision beyond a single lifetime. Um, One heals the bloodline, one safeguards its prosperity. And I think together they transform this survival into sovereignty for the next 7 generations to come. In the psychedelic space, in the healing space, in the spirituality space, they say that when we work on ourselves, we can really start to affect the next 7 generations of our lifetime, of our ancestors. And so I think similarly with Bitcoin, I think that's what's possible. And I wanted to conclude on that because I feel like that's why we're here. That's really what it's for the next generations to birth a new way of living. And so I wanted to close with that and immense gratitude for the opportunity just to share my thoughts. And if you want to connect, please connect with me on X. And thank you again, Tomer, for the opportunity. Thank you, Terrence, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Really appreciate it. Tomer, thank you for bringing Tim. And I know you have to jump, but we can continue the space. And yeah, I think, I think some good things were said here. And I mean, it's always interesting and enlightening and educational for me. I mean, I've never done any type of recreational drug in my life. So this is the furthest thing from my mind. But I do see how obviously we all agree and know that, setting our ego aside and be willing to sort of have a growth mindset and deprogram the way the world has been presented to us is really important in understanding Bitcoin. And if this isn't for everyone, and so if it doesn't work for you, you can easily strap your friends and family into a chair. You can pry their eyes open, sort of like Clockwork Orange, and put them in front of a sailor interview where he tells them that if they save in fiat, he's going to call them poor, because that also works, I think, just as well. So something to keep in mind. Cosmo, are you still with us?
Yeah, I've never had an experience like that. I've tried that method before, and I'll tell you, it doesn't work out very well. But if you find a better video that works where I can pry their eyes open, have them sit there and watch it, then send it to me because I got a lot of people I'm going to strap down.
Yeah. David, I see you have your hand up. We can keep the conversation going in this arena, or we can shift. I think we're having a sort of stage shift, anyways.
Yeah, it looks like he just dropped down. Um, But I think that was a really interesting conversation. I'm right there with you, Terrence. Never done any recreational drugs in my life, and I think that the concept is extremely interesting. And from what I understand about the conversation, it kind of comes down to like, what is everything? What is anything? And wrestling with that question of your own being is kind of the same as wrestling with that question of, what is money? How we interact with each other. And I do think they're incredibly related, and it's not something to be ignored. It's a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, it really is tough when you think about it, especially for those that are more privileged or, aren't in the global south or in West Africa or in, authoritarian regimes with capital controls or in any type of disenfranchised economy. It's like, it's hard. It's like, you work hard, you feel like you're the hero and you're like, well, I'm doing just fine. What, I don't need a solution for a problem that I don't see. And I could see how whether it's, meditation or spirituality or, Tomer's mushrooms that help you get there. And I'm sure it would work a lot faster for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that the problem is being acknowledged by those who are extremely wealthy and those who are kind of in those impoverished nations, because the people who are extremely wealthy are looking at and are aware of, how fast their purchasing power is being melted away because they have enough to like pick that up, right? So for the first, 20 years of the 21st century, it wasn't really noticeable for most people. In the last 5 years, it has been because, inflation's been at the top of everybody's mind. But yeah, like you said, if you don't see that there's a problem, there's no reason to find a solution. And I think that the thing that's been nice about orange pilling people, particularly in the last few years, is because it's really, really easy to point to the problem now, even for people in the middle class.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as like, the windows in your house, over time, they obviously they get dusty, they start to get dirty. But like when you live in your house every day and you look out the window, you never notice it. And so, some window washer, knocks on your door, is like, hey, here's my service, I can wash your windows. And you're like, what? My windows are fine. And it's like, if you were to wash one window and just show you, it's like, oh, holy crap, I just had no idea. It's like, oh, I've been getting brighter light bulbs to make it lighter in my house. I've been painting my walls whiter. And so it's all that friction, to use that analogy for Bitcoin. And I think maybe, eating some mushroom pizza will help you get there, apparently.
See, we got a couple of hands. Go to unsupervised and then Jennifer.
I think the point that Bitcoin, because I'm very new to Bitcoin, but it allows me to get out of fight or flight. The world will keep you in it. It'll just keep you in it, and it allow. And I'm not like I don't have the net worth yet because I just got into it. So, but just knowing it's there and what it's going to do for me and what it's going to do for my son, just having that and it allows me to get out of fight or flight, which then allows you to heal and grow spiritually. um I guess I just wanted to connect to that. Somebody had mentioned about being able, Bitcoin being able to help them get out of fight or flight. And that's so, so true. And that allows more of growth and spirituality, growth and healing from trauma, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I just wanted to reiterate how powerful that is. I think some of you have been out of fight or flight for so long because you've been in Bitcoin for so long, but that has been life altering for me.
I think all the crypto bros could use some of this therapy because they have a ton of trauma. And they're like, please help me see the light. How are you, Jennifer?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. Great topic, great discussion. Thanking Tomer so much for bringing him up. No, I wish Lana was still up on the stage. I kind of had a question for her, but unsupervised is absolutely right. I think for so many people though, for so long, it hasn't affected us. We're just, in the US middle class, we don't see all these things day to day until recently. It's just starting to be more and more apparent and undeniable. I'll never forget the first time some friends from Australia came over, and they were, pretty influential people over there, a bunch of physicians, primary care docs we were collaborating with. And we were at a conference in DC, and they were just so absolutely struck by the fact that our capital city in the US here, which is the most, abundant city in the world, or country in the world, had such homeless. So I mean, it's just like California in some many places. But I think, just to the point, um, we're seeing it more and more. It's everywhere. It's undeniable, even for the upper middle class and higher classes. The 1% are on an increasingly melting iceberg. And I think there is more awareness and compassion, especially as the conflict in the world gets louder and louder. And the refugee pieces you talked about the beginning are spot on. And Puncher do opening up in the global south. And I think it's just going to be not driven. We always are so US driven and so US focused, but I think it's the rest of the world that, by necessity of needing hard money like this, is what's going to drive it. And we think we're doing it all here in the US, but I actually think it's coming from everywhere else, and it'll be, just undeniable. But on the healing arts side, I'm really glad that there are these modalities to kind of help people get there, in mentally get there, hopefully without seeing firsthand the trauma, devastation, the horrific things that are happening in the world. We're hearing about them, but that's different than seeing it firsthand. That, if we can just open up to that, I just wanted to share that. I was hoping Lana would still be here. Like I said, I've heard a lot of friends try to do EMDR and other things like that, and they haven't been able to get past the talk therapy with many of the therapists in mainstream. So that's been frustrating for me. So I think alternative practitioners are really interesting. I like reading about shamans and other things. And world religion wise, we are moving into a new age. Anyway, we all know that, Kali Yuga is ending. No matter, what religion you look at, we're shifting. So this is cool stuff. Thanks guys for doing it today.
Dark, Thomas, you guys still here? You still with us? Has the world fallen apart? Anything happened while we've been talking?
No, I
Terrence, if
just
we don't bring
enjoy,
up the bond market any moment now, we may lose dark side.
I was just enjoying the conversation. Yeah, I do think as we go through the next few years, at some level, we've talked in the past about Myers-Briggs personality profiles and who is drawn to Bitcoin as an asset class and have been the early adopters. Um, these are I would say, the same category of people who are willing to think out of the box and consider the nature of reality and the perception of reality uh, may not be um, set in stone in terms of our own thinking. So I think it's healthy for people to think about uh, adjustments to our perception of reality. We've certainly done that in the monetary realm, but where does it end? It doesn't begin and end in the monetary realm. That's just a manifestation of broader things. What else is going to change about our relationship to each other, to the universe, and who we are as people? AI is revealing many things, and I think it's going to show us much more in the coming years about who we are as people and humans and how we interact together. So these are great exercises to help further contextualize the importance of Bitcoin and the overall plan of things. So very very interesting topic. I've not personally, I've not done recreational drugs past college. And in college, I did. Uh, I think that I don't think they call it reefer anymore. If I say reefer, that means I'm a boomer. But I did a lot of that. But I think today the reefer is or the marijuana is so much more powerful than the crappy bag we smoked back in the 80s. But personally, I don't have a moral objection to people doing it. I just am very cautious. Uh, I want to protect my brain and the way I think about things. I would be open to it in the future, but I'd be extremely cautious at this point to do it until we fully understand the implications of it. So anyway, it's a great conversation. I appreciate the conversation about this.
I need to do math better. So maybe before I take my Six Sigma black belt test next month, I may be doing what was it? The neurofeedback punchers. Maybe that'll help. I was like, yeah. And
Well, just
Bitbonds actually could do
it,
this too.
look, I would say this. If you could magically take a mushroom or a process or procedure that made you much smarter and much more aware, um, at first glance you say, yeah, I want to go do that because, well, why wouldn't you want to improve yourself? I would just caution people to think about the implications of that in their relationships and how they relate to all their family and friends and the society that they live in. Um,
Yeah, I was asking myself just like out of the blue one Sunday morning, if I had a Neuralink available or chip available to, help study for this thing, or would I do it? And exactly like you said, I just don't think I could. Our humanness is too precious.
yeah, I mean, if people haven't watched the Black Mirror series by Charlie Brooker that's on Netflix, it shows an exponential trend of technology against a linear system of social, economic, and political institutions. The human institutions, and how that disconnect. We're just not ready for the change. I would ask people to think about that as they do more. To me it's a big concern. If you were to increase your IQ by 20 or 30 or 50 points, whatever the potential is for this thought exercise, you may find yourself miserable because you no longer relate to the people around you. Jokes are not funny anymore. The conversations become inane and you become antisocial. And do you really want that? So just think it through before you go through this, because if you can't bring people along for the ride, it's going to be a very lonely ride.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Thomas. Well, I don't like to talk about it, but back in my younger years, I would say I fucked up 15 years of my life doing drugs, hallucinogens. I mean, shit. I think when I was in college, I had a bumper sticker on my car that said I break for hallucinations. I used to really overdo it. And these conversations are troubling to me, because I've been clean and sober for a long time now. But I think this is a dangerous road, and again, this is just my opinion. Everyone should do what they want to do, but it didn't end well for me. And all I can share is my experience, strength, and hope on the subject. But since someone mentioned bit bonds, I'm getting excited again. Hopefully, we'll go there.
You're welcome. That can help awaken people much better than psychedelics.
Yeah, look, shit. I mean, I just can't express the damage that was done to my like psyche through overuse of psychedelics and other drugs too. But I guess my favorite drug of choice would have been more at the time period. So whatever you had, I wanted more of it. But today's, I live clean and sober. I'm focused. I study, and I think Thomas made a really good point. I mean, there's the one of the issues with psychedelics and all of these things is you go down a road that, yeah, you may be getting smarter or more enlightened, but you become disconnected. At least from my perspective. Again, I think everybody's brain chemistry is different, and I think different people react to drugs differently. Um, but for me, it was really destructive.
Agreed. And everybody's got to know themselves, like you said. Exactly. For me, I know that my experimentation with marijuana just is not good. It does tend to make me more paranoid. So personally, I have chosen not to ever do it again. And, it is very different species of what we tried when we were kids in the 1980s versus what is out there now. And it is very, very different. It was many years ago now, probably almost 10, but that was not good. I knew for me. So I am very much in agreement with that. I do think there are other things that are happening that are bringing people to an awakening that aren't medication related, but do help open the mind. So hopefully, yeah, like bit bonds.
Hey, Cosmo, shall we take it around the horn, and we can always fire up another space later, but we can keep this closed one branded for Spotify.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go around the horn then. I think we'll let's get Jennifer. Do you want to chime in and say something else? I know that you've kind of had like some of the last words here. Is there any one or two things you'd like to say?
No, I think it's a very relevant to Bitcoin. May not seem like it on the surface, but very, very relevant because Bitcoin is something that is a benefit for all and it's a great equalizer. So that's all I'll say.
Great. Unsupervised?
Yeah, just what I said before. Yeah, Bitcoin allowing us to get out of fight or flight, regardless of when you discover it or it discovers you, is life changing. And that's my experience with it thus far. So, and I appreciate all of you so much. Thank you.
Dog, you want to chime in?
Yeah, hey guys. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to just say that, Bitcoin is the lifeboat. If you're fortunate enough to have a fiat job,
try to do as much as you can, earn as much as you can, and then as much as you can, put it into Bitcoin. And just let time do its course. And you'll see in a few years, you look back and you're just like, holy moly, I feel good. So that's all I really wanted to share.
Parenthetical Matt.
Yeah, I think Thomas, some of your points are really solid, and it's ultimately why, for myself, I've really avoided messing around too much with anything, especially at higher dosage levels, because I do really value just being cognizant of what's going on around me, and perhaps that's a control thing. I don't know, but for every positive story that you hear now, I do think that there are also negative ones. I know a lot of people who have had bad trips that were traumatizing for them. Um, I know that if you're genetically prone to schizophrenia, there can be things like even marijuana that can bring that on, where if you didn't touch it otherwise, maybe would have never become schizophrenic or have that schizophrenia be made worse. So I would just like to echo your words of caution. It's definitely not something that I would just go around willy-nilly messing with and, take 10 grams of mushrooms. I just don't think that's a smart thing to do. I think it's really interesting from a research standpoint. Clearly, it's helping people with PTSD in a controlled clinical setting. And I feel like there's a lot more that we still need to learn before it's something that I would really want to mess with in any capacity. So yeah, just word of caution. I know we had a really good conversation today, and that I think it's important that it's talked about as a viable possibility for some people, especially if you're dealing with PTSD. But if you're not, and you're feel like you're in a pretty good place most of the time, living life, then I don't know. I just don't feel like it's something that I would personally want to mess with, and that's the state I find myself in right now. So
Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
What Dog said there, that there's tons of investments, but let's not lose sight of the fact that Bitcoin is the lifeboat, man. In the end, that's what's going to be there. So I totally 100% believe that, again, risk adjusted, there has never, ever been a better time to buy Bitcoin than literally today. So buy it and own it yourself, lock it up tight, and that's going to be our lifeboat. Nobody else gets it. We get it. So take advantage of that. Love you guys.
Awesome. Go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, I guess this. I kind of echo what Dark said about being careful, and this. While this is a fascinating subject, uh, and people who haven't delved in this world, I would just express caution to examine your goals. Like what would you try to be doing? Because there's an opportunity to just go into this, a platform like X and find people and learn from their experience without the risk, and learn what they did. It is risky. I always, I tell, like, my kids, I said, just don't do the drugs that sound cool. You don't even know what's in it. I mean, unless you were part of the manufacturing process, especially street drugs and things like that, you just don't know what you're doing. So just, again, I'm fascinated by the topic of this, but I'm very cautious and would dissuade people from exploring in this area unless they know exactly what they're doing and have examined their goals.
Great. Go ahead, Dark Side.
Yeah, it just brings me back to this Bitcoin community. After spending 25 years on Wall Street and really getting to understand what the ethos of Wall Street is. Look, the difference between TradFi and Bitcoin is, in TradFi, you're trying to screw the next guy. Everything's about getting over on somebody, pulling the rug on somebody, skimming off somebody. And the Bitcoin community is the exact opposite. Right? It's about love, it's about sharing, it's about knowledge, it's about understanding. Mm. To me, this community is the ultimate healer, right, for the world's ills. So the last 9 months that I've kind of come out and started speaking on Bitcoin and talking, it's been a real eye-opening and awakening experience. So maybe try immersing yourself in Bitcoin and immersing yourself in the community and seeing the love That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I love that dark side. I think it has been interesting for me too, as I've kind of been more a part of the Bitcoin community, to kind of see the discrepancy between you guys on here who I chat with on a daily basis, and even the friends that I have in my normal life. I feel like as I kind of dive down this path of just seeking truth, there are parts of my personality that have changed, where I have, friends that I grew up with, and not that they're bad people or that, that they've changed at all. I've just changed significantly to the point where it's like, you know what? I'm different now. I don't know if these are the people that I want to spend my time with anymore. And it's kind of become where I have this incessant search for truth and understanding. And it's really just been like this thirst for knowledge. So I totally vibe with what you're saying. But yeah, awesome space, guys. I didn't participate all that much because I'm not super familiar with a lot of the topic that we talked about today. But I thought it was a really interesting conversation, and I'm glad for those who are relevant in that kind of space with this hallucinogens and maybe stuff like that. I thought it was interesting to hear some takes of you know a lot of things that have helped them, and some people who are saying, maybe be careful with some of this stuff because it's dangerous. I think it's good to take both into account. And I think for closing out here, be very careful. We're not saying that you should go and do this stuff. Don't think that that's what we're trying to do here. Seek advice somewhere else besides randos on Twitter, I guess. But yeah, over to you, Terrence.
Yeah, like you, Cosmo, and like a lot of us here, it's like this is not my wheelhouse at all. It's fun to learn about, and I get why there's a parallel. I mean, think about one of our biggest memes in Bitcoin, right? It's the orange pill. We want to orange pill people. We want people to see what we see, but we also have to remind ourselves we had to do a lot of work. It wasn't easy, and we all kind of went down the same ups and downs journey to get there. Like, it really does require work. I just think sort of like a trust fund kid or something. You can't just be handed something and appreciate it or understand what you have. Like, it does take work, and maybe mushrooms or whatever um, will help some people get there, especially those who've had trauma in the past and whatnot. But I don't know. Yeah, from my perspective, and maybe it's limited, maybe I'm ignorant. It just is going to require work, and we can only bring them so far before they have to do it on their own. And maybe that's why the adoption is such that it is. And I think it's somewhat the way Satoshi designed it, so that it is a bottom up approach, that it is for the people. I see Justin on stage here, and I know he has often said, like, hey, it's not going to be the nation states, it's going to be the people, and then it's going to be the companies, and it's like, which in a weird way or a good way, it's like, this is the way it should be. Let those who really have been debased and devalued and diluted the most from political currencies, let them benefit from a better and more hopeful way. So anyways, great discussion, everyone. Really appreciate everyone showing up, and we will see you tomorrow.